All right, it looks like the room is stabilized a little bit in terms of people joining us, so we'll get started. Hello, my name is Cindy Cornell. I'm the career coach for working professionals here at the Yale School of Management, and today we're going to be speaking about negotiating your job offer. The really fun news is I've been talking to lots of people about negotiating job offers lately, so I'm optimistic that in the midst of a global pandemic, hiring is happening and people are moving into higher level roles that they're really excited about, and sometimes negotiating agreements that are even better than they'd imagined. So that's possible for you as well. And I look forward to sharing more about that with you today. I do appreciate you joining. There will be time for answers at the end or to answer your questions at the end. So please share them at any time in the Q&A during the presentation. And I will also encourage you to please look for the email from my colleague from Alumni Relations, Kayla, who will be sending out a recording after the presentation with slide notes for those that are interested. So you'll find that link for other career resources as well on the SOM alumni portal, or you can go to the videos tab of the Yale School of Management YouTube page. In terms of our time together, please do focus on it. We have about an hour, and I am looking forward to, as I said, answering your questions. So please share those as we go. In terms of today's agenda, we're going to go through a couple of things. Everyday negotiating. We do negotiate things all the time. I know I have a 14-year-old, and regularly it feels like I'm negotiating with him. We'll talk about some best practices specifically for job offer negotiations, and then I'll share with you some resources that you can refer back to after the program, and then we'll get into some wrap up. One of the things I'd like to ask in wrap up is that you will get a post-session survey. I would love for you to share feedback. I'm here for you. And it's really useful to hear both what you find useful and what I might have done differently to make this more effective for you. So let's dive in then. Everyday negotiating. What's your perspective? How do you look at negotiating? There's a couple of different ways of doing it. These are two very similar definitions with a big difference. Both are true to some extent, and one is probably going to get better results faster and a little bit more easily. Negotiation is much more about collaboration than it is about competition. The first definition here talks more about beneficial outcome, but it seems to be a bit one-sided. There's no mention of collaboration. So the mutual interest isn't there. It might be beneficial to one party more so than the other, or that may be the perspective of the negotiator. The second is a bit more iterative, and it seeks to optimize for everybody involved. There seems to be greater alignment and focus on what's an outstanding outcome, and a clearer future-focused vision rather than a present-day win-lose. There may also be some collaborative exploration as we're talking about a process about how things might be improved. Please don't negotiate for sport. I know there's some people out there that are very competitive. Please negotiate in a job offer situation if it's meaningful to you, if it creates value and is meaningful to you. Carol Dweck's mindset principles may be a useful frame for you to review through this. Win-win occurs when we are in a growth mindset, and it fosters relationship with others through curious conversation and exploration of those variables and interactions. So important how we approach negotiation for us to be able to get the results that we're seeking from negotiation. Through negotiation, I also want you to think about being a confident colleague in our everyday conversations. Showing up in a negotiation is something that helps people to know what you're going to be like in the job. And you can practice this in just how you show up on a regular day-to-day basis, where you're authentic and researched, and you understand why you're asking for what you're asking for, and the rationale actually relates back to the people that you're talking to. Even Sheryl Sandberg, who is at Facebook as a COO, talked about negotiating as a proxy for how she would show up in her book Lean In when she joined the organization. She needed to negotiate her offer because they needed to know that she was going to negotiate on Facebook's behalf in a powerful way when she stepped into that role. So this is a great opportunity to show people how you're going to be as a colleague and a partner. The Grow the Pie framework is one that's foundational to many negotiation strategies. Barry Nelbuff, who is here at Yale, talks about this, and he leads with this concept when he teaches. Daly and Kane, who is here at Yale School of Management, also talks about making smart trades that are valuable to one party and maybe cheap for the other. And it takes some evaluation and exploration to do the research to understand both sides. So please do think about that in your negotiation, that there are ways to create value. How do we actually get to this space of negotiating well? Practice every day. There's a list here of a variety of things. I'd like to speak about a couple of them. These practices are as important at home as they are at work. And I do want you to be clear in any communications that you can be, when you want to meet, who should be present, what the agenda is. Starting with the end in mind makes it a lot easier to get things done more quickly. Before you go into a meeting, before you actually make plans with your family, you want to be really specific. Who's at the table? What's orienting them? What's motivating them? What do they value? What are they dealing with personally or professionally? What else are they juggling? What do they say yes to typically, and what do they bristle at? In terms of a couple of these bullet points, they may not be as clear for you as some of the others. So I just wanted to talk about constraints in an organization. There may be rules, there may be regulations, there may be standards of practice. Some companies may now be moving into equity compensation where they can't negotiate as much as they used to because they're trying to actually, kind of even things out for folks. So you really want to kind of do your research and understand what the constraints are within which you would be negotiating. And you also want to know who's actually at the table with you and who has decision-making power. So is this somebody who's going to have to ask for something on your behalf, or is this somebody who can actually make a decision today on whether or not we're going to move forward with this element of negotiation? Another element around assumptions. You've done some research, presumably, before you step into a negotiation. I want you to test your assumptions to make sure that the way you see the world is, in fact, the way the other party sees the world. It may not be, and there may be some curious conversation and dialogue to figure out how others do see things so that you can align how you ask for things in ways that they would see greater value. When we think about planning for implementation, what could get in the way of that? Somebody might be saying no to something, not because they don't want you to have it, but because they can't figure out a way to make it happen. So if you can actually share in your conversation some ideas forward about how that could look and why that's beneficial to everyone, it might make it easier to have people say yes to that. And then the last thing on this page I want to kind of point out and just describe in a little bit more detail is this idea of anchoring bias. Oftentimes when we're in conversation with people, the first thing that's said is the thing that we anchor to. And we then have to spend some time maybe trying to convince people or persuade people of other ideas. So think about whether you want to be the first person or a later person to respond to or to bring up an idea in a negotiation. We'll talk about this a little bit later when I speak more about proactively coming up with objection responses. What a person or a company can say yes to is often dependent on these internal rules or standards and practices. Sometimes there's flexibility and sometimes there's not. So again, being thoughtful about who you're talking to and asking really smart questions along the way is going to help you to be a better negotiator. And these are things, again, that you can practice in your day-to-day with your family, in your current roles, even in negotiating what movie you might want to see on the weekend when you get to step away from the Zoom screen and maybe dive into a different kind of a screen. Now let's move into specific. This my watch out at the bottom. Please do not assume that you're all on the same page. You do want to test those assumptions because if you don't test them, you could be actually working against yourself, where it might take just a slight adjustment in your ask to get the yes you're looking for. So in terms of best practices for the job negotiation, first of all, let me say congratulations, you just got an offer. This is so exciting. They chose you and they're really excited to get this negotiation wrapped up and get you started. They believe you have the requisite skills and experience and leadership personality to successfully contribute to the organization. And if you're just now starting to think about negotiating this offer, you're late. You've missed a bunch of opportunities to figure out where there might be flexibility and to be curious about what might be possible. You've likely spent a lot of the a lot of the interview process convincing them or selling yourself, as opposed to being in this two-way dialogue, seeking to understand more about the opportunity and how you can create even greater value for the organization that they might have imagined. Anyway, you have this offer, you might be anxious. That's not a bad thing, and it's quite normal. It's at this point, I also want to remind you that you want to reframe that anxiety as excitement and think about, kind of looking at that heightened arousal as a way to fuel your curious exploration through this process, as opposed to a negative where you're kind of bristling and nervous about getting it right. So again, stay in this curious, excited, forward-thinking growth mindset. How can we space? And I'll tell you that it's been proven in research that reframe will help you to perform better in the subsequent conversations. So again, congratulations. Let's get started. Start with the end in mind. I would love you to have this idea about, at the end of the negotiation, what happened? You feel great about the opportunity. You didn't leave anything on the table. You were poised, you were confident. And through the process, you built rapport with the people that you'd be working with throughout the organization in a way that has set you up to be even more successful in the role. Visualize this, and then we can back into that and figure out, what do you need to do at every step to make that happen for real? To achieve your vision, you're going to have prepared thoughtfully for this negotiation. Write down what you want, what's on the table, what's possible. This includes big things like equity compensation, vesting programs, non-compete agreements, and even little things like a budget for your home office setup or provision for your planned summer holiday that you're looking forward to taking this year after having not had a vacation last year. How you showed up to this point will have helped them to respect you more. And hopefully at the end of the negotiation, they're even more excited about bringing you onto the organization than they were when they gave you the offer. Through the process, you will have gotten some yeses, and that's great. And if you've gotten some no's, that's also not a bad thing, because you're going to understand more about what the organization is, who they are, how they operate, and what's possible. This is going to be important when you get started, because these are sharing with you some of their ways of working. So starting with this idea of, what do you want? We need to be clear about it. Easier if you don't yet have an offer in hand, to kind of create this screen where you're evaluating the things. If the most amazing job fell out of the sky into your lap, what would that be? How would that actually look? How would that feel? How would you live? What's important to you personally? What's non-negotiable versus what's nice to have? Offers are rarely comparable on an apples to apples basis. Knowing what you want and ranking those items as non-negotiable and nice to haves will help you in the long run. Some people can create the screen very systematically. Some people create detailed spreadsheets. Some people rank order values. Some people do it in different ways. It might be a visual oriented mind map. However you choose to do it for you, please do it, because it's going to make later stages of negotiation and evaluation of multiple offers, if you have them, much easier. In coaching conversations, I often ask people about their long-term career goals. How do you feel about this opportunity? Is it setting you up to get to where you would like to be in 5 years or in 10 years? What new skills are you going to learn in this role that are going to help you to leverage in the future into what you'd like to do in a few years? And in what ways will this experience have helped you in terms of new relationships, in terms of new stories that you'd like to share? So, really about what you want. It's not just in a negotiation, the dollar value of a job. It's much more comprehensive than that. So to know that and to be able to evaluate that is super helpful. What to negotiate? Please only negotiate if it's important to you and it's important to your ability to succeed in the role. You make a defensible and rational position to why you would like it and why it's important, and it makes sense and can be justified in the organization. Create mutual benefit where you negotiate. Some things cost money, some things don't. Understand what's available and possible. And you'll want to figure this out through research and through informational interviews that you have, preferably before you even get to this stage. They may be conversations you have before you even apply for the job. You're starting to compile this information that's going to come together and help you to come up with the very best deal for yourself and the organization you say yes to. There's lots of lists out there that you can start from. I suggest you look at a few. There's a few in the resources. I'll give you a couple of examples in a few minutes. Those are good places to start. And they're incomplete. All models are wrong and some are useful. So these aren't built for you. You need to actually personalize them for yourselves. In this current pandemic environment that we're living in, deferred relocation and home office setup are things that are often negotiated for, even flexible hours on the table. These things weren't as prevalent in the past. So, you're really going to want to go through that and think about how you want to live your life and how you want to have that balance between work and life work. And are you actually setting yourself up for that success in your whole life, not just in this job? If there's uncertainty about what you want or what would be equitable internally, they may not be able to say yes. So asking for and pressing for things that would create challenge or issue with the people that you're negotiating with is not going to necessarily win you points on a relationship standpoint. So I do want you, again, to think about who you're talking to. And these are people you're going to be working with, in the future. So you want to start off on a really nice foot. Here's another example of a list. Again, this one is from the Yale SOM offer negotiation guide that's in the career resources under general career support in the alumni portal. And it's a great start, but there's still some more work to do. Is this complete? As I mentioned a moment ago, does it include everything that's typical on the table for the organization that you're talking about? Does it include everything that's important to you personally? At a more granular level, what base salary do you want? What's your range? What rationale do you have? What understanding do you have about their total compensation package and their structures and salary banding that would inform and adjust or support your range? Did you glean any information in your interviews that would let you understand how flexible they might be and on what points they might be flexible? There's a lot of variables at play here. And I want you to write things down throughout the process so that you can keep track of them. From unpacking job descriptions and informational interviews through your formal interviews and negotiations, this is really important. Imagine if you're working a couple of job opportunities at the same time. Again, you want to keep this straight for yourself. It's going to help you to communicate really clearly and with confidence through the process. And that's important to you getting what you're wanting. Here's another example of a list. This one may feel like it's more accurate or important or in some way more reliable because there's a score. Well, again, it's a formal rating matrix and it's using some numeric weights where we're adjusting the values according to what we think is important. It's useful if it's complete, if it includes all the things that are important to you. Something you might care about that's not on this list is a company's policies around pay parity. That's something that would need to be added. And the again, the list of things that are on here, some things might not be as important to you. And again, this is a useful tool where you can start to try to compare things where they're not comparable apples to apples. You've got some kind of basics where you can look at trade-offs and such, and you come down to at the bottom a score that you can actually step back and support your decision with. But again, the model is only as good as the inputs, and we want to make sure that the inputs are yours and they're very helpful to you, and you feel really good about it at the end. Remember, starting with the end in mind. Throughout your negotiation, you're going to want to know your audience. Nothing is more important about understanding who the other person is that you're speaking with. What's motivating them? Why do they want these things? Curiosity, in this case, is a superpower. And I would suspect or suggest it would be a superpower in the decade ahead, where we are faced with so much uncertainty and the world continues to move, and we truly are in a knowledge economy. And we're going to be working more and more with artificial intelligence and data, and being curious about what data is available, looking for new patterns of behavior, et cetera. Curiosity is going to continue to be a superpower, not just in negotiation, but in our work in a larger scale. So foster that, that curiosity, that growth mindset, again, that I mentioned earlier. How will you know what the person you're negotiating with is going to say yes to if you're not sure who they are? Research your interviewers and anyone else that you might be interacting with. Develop rapport. I joke with people that they should, kind of selectively stalk people on LinkedIn, see what they're posting, what do they care about. When you start in the role, having those relationships and having invested in that rapport is going to be really helpful to you. Never also underestimate the power of a good Boolean Google search. Negotiating with, put your company here, that might help you to understand a bit more about what the company does and says on a regular basis, and have some benchmarks to start with. You can supplement those findings and confirm those with your informational interviews, with your networks, and in the smart questions you're asking through your negotiations. It's also very helpful to have done that in advance, because when you get to the negotiation stage, if you've gotten some of those answers and you have aligned around what some of the assumptions might be already, we can focus much more succinctly and clearly on some of those elements of the negotiation that are of critical importance to you. Remember also, please, that the people that you're talking to have other things on their plates. While this might be the most important thing on your plate right now, finishing up this job offer negotiation and starting in this new role about which you're so excited, they are in a hiring process, which might be one of many, and they are working at home, likely with their families in the midst of a pandemic, as you have been. Everybody's got things going on, so please don't take it personally if you don't hear back right away, and be thoughtful about what's going on in their world. You might even be able to figure out some things happening because of something you've seen in the news about the company. So pay attention and be curious and check in with people personally. Again, that's a wonderful way to develop rapport. You are just one of the many things they're juggling. And remember, they offered you a job. They're excited to bring you in. If they can't actually focus 100% on you, again, please give them that space, especially if it's a hiring manager who's trying to juggle multiple roles because your role is open and they're trying to kind of get a lot of things done. So again, I think I've shared sufficiently there. You're there to create value for the company. Always know this, who you're talking to, and I mentioned this earlier, what power they have in the process. HR is likely working with many people. Your hiring manager may be only working with you, and each has different motivations and interests and levels of patience and powers to say yes to things. Some orienting principles. Now, I'm sharing a lot of information with you. When you're asking for things in your negotiation, they need to be able to do it. So again, if you've done this research and you understand what constraints might be there, super helpful. You might create a couple of scenarios for yourself about how things might play out through the negotiation. And you might think about different responses or combinations of ideas that you could put together in terms of maximizing value and benefit for all. Be clear in your communications. I've said this before, make it easy for them to say yes. Also check your bearings regularly. Again, I talked about assumptions a few slides ago. You want to make sure that you've both agreed on the same things, you both see them from the same perspective. And if you do that with your negotiating partner and kind of in a regular basis agree with this is what we've agreed and this is what's still in play. Super helpful to understand what it might take to get this done. Again, seeing things through their eyes, really important. So when you ask for it, for them to say yes, they need to see a benefit. They may or may not be thinking about it so much from your point of view because they may not actually understand what your long-term career goals might be, or the order in which you value things. So if you can try to figure out those things from their point of view and help them to understand what might be smart trades, where something's more important to you than it might be for them, where it might be inexpensive for them to give it and really valuable to you, super helpful. Those are the smart trades that I talked about earlier. Another way of looking at this is, what do they hate least? And asking things that way, if you're offering them a couple of things, which is least offensive to you, will help you also to figure out their prioritization and where they might be more willing to and less willing to be flexible. Please be ambitious about your goals and also flexible in how you get them. You're going to want to proactively check out things like vault.com and salary.com and even LinkedIn salary function to understand a little bit more about negotiation, about compensation packages, et cetera. There are differences, this is important, in compensation packages, even within the same company. As we cross geographies and countries, there could be different costs of living, governmental regulations and mandates, and even just similar common practices in different countries. So do your research to understand what's important and what's possible in the location that you're considering, which may be different from the one that you're in currently. That calibration is going to be important also in terms of what you're going to ask. There's literally hundreds of questions you could ask. And this is just a very abbreviated list. Harvard has a negotiation preparation checklist, and I've included that link in the slides that you can actually have a peek at after the program. Set up to win. Again, if we are starting with that end in mind, that winning vision, you want to be willing to work with them and yet not to upset their apple cart. You want to be reasonable and have your defensible positions and allow flexibility. Too much back and forth is actually going to diminish rapport. They'll like you less, and it could blow up a deal. I'd love for people to, through the negotiation practice, like you more and be more excited about bringing you into the organization than they were when they even gave you the offer, because the way you showed up helped them to see that you're actually there truly to create greater value for the organization and that they made a really smart choice. Negotiation's a dance. You're going to want to sometimes negotiate multiple things at once, signaling what's most important to you. You might share a couple of what are considered multiple equivalent offers, where you could say, I would be happy with this and I would be happy with this. And they would be able to see where there's some trade-offs in the calculus for yourself. You might consider timing. If you get a no, well, if we can't negotiate this today, what's in the way of that and when might we do that? Or what makes that difficult for you to say yes to today? Again, remember this idea where you might be in multiple negotiations at once or multiple interview streams at once. Please don't rush your offers. You want to kind of think about at what point will I be getting offers so that you can truly evaluate them concurrently. And please don't make ultimatums, because that's a surefire way to kind of shut things down. Again, you want to show that you're willing to work and collaborate. If somebody throws something out there that's really quite out there, it's so far away from what you'd thought that they might be offering, please don't rush into answering to that either. You might actually sit there in, I don't want to call it a stunned silence, but to allow yourself to take in the information, really absorb it, and allow you to diffuse any idea you might have about self-advocacy, where they might come up with something more that will help you to have an even more thoughtful and successful response to their suggestion. If they actually come up with something that is really outside of your range, for example, something that's a non-negotiable on your point, it's okay actually to say that's actually not anywhere in my range, and let them know that. Because if they don't know that and you're negotiating around that, you're wasting a little bit of time. So allow yourself to pause, and again, we'll negotiate, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more, your value and why that doesn't actually make sense for you or for the company. You need to, again, understand their constraints, write it all down, think about this in terms of deal sheets, and how do we actually, again, grow that pie? What's equivalently good works for both. How you show up matters. Again, mindset we started with. You want to be open and honest and empathetic throughout, and you want to be confident. And where there might be some potential objections, you want to overcome them to the extent that you can proactively. This can start, again, as early as you unpacking job descriptions, where there might be some requirement for experience and you don't have it quite that way. You want to be really clear about how you've come to the experience that's even better than what they asked for. And you mitigate the risk, right? That experience is a proxy for your ability to do something or achieve something as part of the role, by showing them that you understand what's needed and answering to that you are different from others and even better because, is going to overcome that objection. And again, I go back to the idea of anchoring bias I shared earlier. You are now not trying to persuade them against something that they've put out there. They now have to evaluate, is that really so important, or are we able to kind of move forward and compensate you better as a result of this other experience? So I also want you to be thoughtful about how you feel through the process. Pay attention. Happiness isn't found at the negotiating table. I want you to be really careful that you're saying yes to and fighting for the jobs that are going to actually make a difference for you in your life and have you be happy. In terms of responses, in any of your responses, think about whether they would be offended by how you're presenting something. What would they say yes to? Is it reasonable? Would you say yes to that? Are you thoughtfully considering their point of view? If you're asking for something, again, share your rationale in a way that will be meaningful to them. It's not personal. It's not, I deserve it. It makes sense to them, and they can actually share it with others in their organization in ways that makes it easy for them to do that. You also want to be clear about timing, yours and theirs, staying at the table and being engaged and understanding processes. Again, if you're not ready for an offer yet because you've got some other things going on, please don't rush them to a decision. That's going to put you in an uncomfortable position later on when you might have to say no to something without another offer on the table, or you might say yes to something and then wonder if something else could have come along that would be better. Again, how you show up in this negotiation is going to be a preview of what you're going to be like to work with. Please don't make them change their mind about asking you to join their team. Getting to a question that you're probably all very excited about, the money question. What am I worth? People ask me this in coaching conversations all the time. I don't know. What are you worth? It's really a function of the value you're going to create in the organization. How, by bringing you in and paying you, is the company going to be better off? You're going to be creating value in some multiples of the amount that they're paying you, in terms of greater value both today or potentially growth in the future. You want to do your research here and be very thorough. If you can't find salary comps for your own role, look at other roles at the same level. Yale, for example, there's approximately 10,300 people that work for Yale, and I am the only person here with my job title. So if I were looking just for that comp, I wouldn't be able to figure it out. But if I actually step back and say, what is the banding? What is this? Who are people I would be working with? What are similar roles? I certainly can find a lot of very useful comparable compensation packages. So spend a little bit of time calculating also what your contribution is. Profitability, sales, cost savings. If you are coming into an organization and perhaps there's a really big deliverable, you might want to help them to understand that the amount of money in question in terms of your negotiation is less than the 1 month's delay in getting this project in. So they could maybe hire somebody who's cheaper than you. The risk of not getting it done on time, where you have great experience and you've done this thing before, that might make it easier for them to say, yeah, this mitigating factor is making it worth us actually saying yes to this higher amount that you might be looking to get. Your range is really important. It's going to depend on what the job is. So if somebody asks you at the very beginning of a negotiation, a very beginning of or even in an interview process, what's your salary requirement? An answer that I might suggest is saying it's my range is in this place based on what I understand of the role today. And through the interviews, we're going to learn much more about what's expected and what skills and experience I bring and the value that I'll be creating in the organization. And I'd feel much more comfortable, narrowing that range when we're a little bit further along in the process. So you're both signaling something that's larger and also letting them know that you're very thoughtful about this to make sure that it's equitable and it makes sense for both sides. You want to be really clear about your summary value position. You're going to be sharing this over and over. You want to practice it. This is one of the things that I find people are most uncomfortable in talking about, why they are worth what they're worth. And, if you don't negotiate that well and you don't feel good about how you're being compensated or treated in the organization with regard to how much you're contributing, that creates a pretty unsustainable situation, and you're not going to be happy. And I really do want you to be happy in the work that you're doing. So practice that. And if I can help you, let me know. I want to remind you that there's other jobs. You might have invested a lot in the negotiation for this particular job. There's others out there. So you really need to understand what is your best alternative to negotiated agreement or your BOTNA. When did you walk away? What are your most important priorities? And where are you least flexible? What's your reservation point? The place where you kind of couldn't care less whether we do it or we don't, right? It's the neutral. Through this process, please do not settle. I want you to be really clear about what your worth is and to confidently communicate that in ways that it makes other people excited about that as well. I mentioned in one of the early slides the idea of watching out about assumptions. It's really important as well around the alignment of values. Please do not assume that your values are how the other organization operates as well. You're going to want to be thoughtful through your negotiation process, through your interview process, to make sure that the way you think things will be are in fact how they will be as you experience them, so that you will be in a space of not just having a compensation and benefits package that you're happy about, but also that your personal bottom line includes culture fit in a way that you're going to thrive. You deserve it. Some special circumstances, equity offers. If you're talking with some startups, it's really important to understand what's possible. Where are they in the process? How much do you want to actually not take on today in terms of base comp, because there's some possibility for some payout in the future. In the notes to the presentation, I do have a number of articles on equity offer resources. Again, you're going to have to create that list for yourself based on that particular circumstance. I mentioned proximate versus proven experience. You want to, again, think about this from a risk management standpoint in an organization where they might say, well, we can't pay you X because you don't have whatever it is that you don't have. Again, you want to think about this proactively and share with them why you do have the skills requisite to get the things done that they're asking for, and perhaps even to do more better, leveraging your creativity and innovation, because you have gotten it in another way, and it's bringing a different skill set that's going to be differently valuable to the organization even more. Where you're talking about major shifts in industry or specialization, again, you're going to want to think about what are they worried about, what are the risks they might see, and how do I proactively come through those and articulate why what you have is transferable and, again, more valuable than they might be thinking about it right now. Again, they don't come from your experience, so you really have to build that bridge for them to be able to value it. Using their language, super important. Using examples of what's happening in their business, not what's happened in your prior businesses, also really important. Asking them to do something that's outside of their regular practice. This was a question that came in to the presentation before in advance. If you are looking to negotiate a contract term in a role where that might be what's expected, sometimes people might be looking at a 1-year contract term or a 2-year contract term. You might argue for a 3-year contract term. Again, I would be really clear about why that makes sense and what is the incremental value you would get in that 3rd year that you couldn't get in that 2nd year. 1st year, you're kind of coming up to speed. 2nd year, you've fixed some things now that you really understand the processes. 3rd year, you're actually in a space of building and transitioning strongly to whoever takes the contract on next. So you're going to want to really think about what's that value and what's in the way of them saying yes to that? Because if there are kind of defined contract year terms, there might be some internal guidance that requires that we'd have to overcome or persuade folks to be a little bit more lenient or change process. Significant title change. Again, how does this title permit you to get greater results through this organization? That's going to be important for them to say yes to, and really kind of this idea of you representing the company, representing the brand, and also perhaps who you might be negotiating with or working with cross-functionally. A title might be really important in terms of getting people to say yes to your conversations, collaborating, being seen as an equal at the table. Also, not all companies and not all industries have equal title functions. So again, coming back to and talking about the parity of your title to what others are contributing within the organization at the same level. You're going to want to have thought through those things and have myriad data points to share with folks. Exploding offers is another one to share. First off, I'd like to say if the company is giving you an exploding offer, right, you have to say yes to this right now. It gives you some insight to who they are. So again, I go back into the values and say, does this make sense? Am I feeling rushed into something? Check in about what am I anxious? Why am I not comfortable saying yes to this right now? What's in it for them to push me this way? So have a peek at all of those different ideas. And I'd also share with you there's a reference that I've made to exploding offers in the notes here as well. Your preparation in advance for any of these situations and your curiosity about them is going to help to set you up to answer these things well. If you get an exploding offer, for example, it's probably common practice in the company to do that. So you won't be surprised when it happens to you, and you'll have prepared for that. Influence and persuasion. Again, super important to think about who are they going to need to talk to elsewhere in the organization. Are they able to make the decision? Is somebody else making the decision? And what's going to be helpful for them to share? Understanding their objections are going to be critical to you, again, coming up with these proactive responses in ways that it flips things around and gets you to the yes that you're looking for. That's it that I have in terms of content. I see that there's some questions populating. Let me now go into and share with you a couple of resources. Again, in the general career support under career resources on the alumni portal, you'll find links to our prior webinars, and you'll also find links to future events, and you will also find a number of other things, including a negotiation guide and the evaluation matrix that I mentioned earlier and showed you pictures of in the presentation. I mentioned prior webinars. This is one in a long series of webinars. So if you're here, you've probably gone through a few of these other steps as well. If you're just starting, in your process of looking for a new job and thinking about what's possible, there's some resources here that are recorded previously. Again, you can find them on our alumni portal in career resources, and you can also find them on the Yale School of Management video page in the YouTube channel. I want to say thank you again to my colleague, Kayla Heaslip, who is behind the scenes in alumni relations, without whom I wouldn't be able to have done all of this over the last year. So thank you, Kayla, for being here for everyone and getting all of these scheduled for us. I also want to share with you a couple of other Yale resources that we have in terms of executive education. If you want to focus on negotiation much more so, there is an online course with senior lecturer Dalian Kane. And I mentioned also Barry Nailbuff's negotiation practices. He's very well known, and there is a free course on Coursera where you can dive into much more of what he would be teaching in the classroom today. And last but not least, here's some resources that are outside of Yale that I found to be really powerful. Negotiating a job offer, Lee Thompson has a wonderful list, a wonderful white paper. Professor Deepak Malhotra from Harvard Business School has a fabulous YouTube video that I encourage you to have a peek at before you engage in any negotiation. It's, again, going to help you be in the right mindset and think about how you want to frame your asks. And also, I wanted to share with you somebody who I've learned about more recently, Kwame Christian from Ohio State. He's got a podcast and some negotiation guides that I found to be very well articulated and helpful in a variety of situations. And he also brings a more diverse viewpoint to negotiation, which many of us might find useful. So we're almost there with, not a ton of time to address questions, but enough, hopefully, to get through a lot. I'm hopeful that you've picked up along the way today a few hints that are going to help you to think about how you might negotiate differently in the future. And if you want to share something about what you found useful in the chat, please don't hesitate to do that as well. Again, questions in the Q&A would be really useful. Final thoughts. I just want to remind you, negotiations are with people, and relationships matter. Anything that you do on a given day is going to either strengthen or weaken those relationships. You may be the most qualified candidate, and you may have done all the research in the world to prepare. It's not going to compensate for not focusing on those relationships and developing strong rapport with the people that you're negotiating with. You're going to be working with these people in the future, and they're going to negotiate, or they're going to influence how well you'll be successful in the organization, and how quickly you can get started when you get there. Finally, I just want to remind you that long-term happiness is not found at the negotiation table. So I do want to make sure that you're choosing really carefully your careers and the people you choose to spend them with. So here we are. I'm ready for your questions. For those of you that want more one-on-one guidance and assistance, I do encourage you to reach out through the career portal and our application CMS or 1220 to make that appointment. And it's also really useful to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, so that we can begin to get to know each other a little bit in that way as well. So let's see what we have for questions. When negotiating an offer, how do you think through whether to make the first move and provide target offer numbers, potentially anchoring high, versus waiting for the employer to come up with the first numbers, where you risk potentially lowballing, where they might put out there this idea of lowballing with another offer? Again, your research is going to potentially help you to understand if you want to come out with the first offer. I think oftentimes it can be helpful, where you're saying, okay, here's what I've heard, here's what I think makes sense based on our interviews. Especially if you're coming into a more senior role, you're able to articulate a little bit about how you're seeing things and what the value is, what's at stake for the organization. And if you've done the numbers and you have that rationale, it's not necessarily a bad move, especially where you might also have that knowledge of what the salary banding is, and you're putting that that suggestion out there kind of at the higher end of that salary band. It's not something that they would necessarily say no to. So so I would say that, that's actually not a bad strategy if you have the right information to answer that. Or hopefully that was helpful. How do we assess the tool that was just shared with the spreadsheet and weights, or access that? Again, that tool, for those of you who are alums, that is in the alumni career resources, on the Yale SOM portal, and that is located, basically under the in the negotiation section of general career support. So that's an easy way for you to log in and find that, as soon as the session is over today. I've also added a link to that in the spreadsheet. So if you've registered, you'll be able to kind of see that and follow through. And just click through the link onto the portal. When you refer to doing your research, is this something the company can do? How can we research things like that around vacation days or work from home setup? What's doable for a company and what doesn't, a company we don't yet work for. We have really remarkable networks. And even if you're not connected yet with somebody in that company, I suspect you're one or two people away from that. So, this is where really having a thorough understanding of LinkedIn, how it works, is really helpful. I'm of a belief that if you want to figure this out, especially with the internet, there's so many different avenues to find it. You have to first believe that you can figure it out. So first, I'd write down what you'd like to know about it, and why those things are important to you, and then we can actually try to figure out who can we ask. And the other thing I'd like to say regarding work from home and some of these things that are kind of new for many companies. I know some companies, like Deloitte, have had people that have been working from home for a decade. And other companies, a year ago would have said, we don't do work from home. We can't work from home. And lo and behold, we've all been working from home for a year. How that continues is still being decided and evaluated by many companies. So with that, I'd also say be careful about what's known and what's not known, because if they don't know and you're pushing on it yet, because it's not decided at a global level, that's just something to watch for. So, they don't want to put you in a position where you would be getting something that other people don't have. That could be very costly for that company. But, stepping back and again, looking at this question at the highest level, write down what you're trying to figure out, and then let's figure out who can we talk to who might have some point of view and perspective here. That could also include people who've left the company. They might sometimes be even more willing to have those conversations. So think about your SOM colleagues and classmates. Think about people that went to the school that you've not even met yet. Think about your undergraduate institution or any other schools that you've attended over time. You might even look at people that have worked for companies that you've worked for in the past. We all have long careers, and I like to say that the world is small and careers are long. So there's lots of opportunities to talk to people who might have perspective to share. I know our employers are obliged to share salary ranges after the first round of interviews in California. Do you know what's true in other states? I don't actually know what the rules are in each state. Again, this is one of the reasons why I stated in the presentation, it's super important to do your research up front and understand what's customary in that geography and that location, what's compelled and mandated or regulated by the organization. So this is really important, often in companies that are in Europe as well, where they have very specific labor laws. So you want to know where you're going and what's possible there. And again, if we are looking at trying to figure this out for you, let's have a conversation about specifically what you're looking for, and we can try to sort through that. Libraries, I would suggest, are also really useful resources here, where they might be able to help you out. And many libraries, both school libraries and local libraries, have very robust career departments and business service centers. So those could be a couple of places to start to figure out the answers to some of these questions. recruiters tend to ask for candidates' target compensation at the start of a negotiation. How do you respond to this? Is it wise to actually provide a target range, especially given the information asymmetry here and the chance that the range may be way higher than the candidate's target range? Again, I want you to feel good about whatever you say yes to at the end. And if you say something that's too low at the beginning of a negotiation, that could kind of put you into a position where you feel like you did leave something on the table. So again, this is a place where the research up front is important. You don't wait until you get into the offer to have that conversation. If you're working with an external recruiter, they should have some idea about what the range is before you even go in. And if you're thinking about, and this is another place or way that I would play with this, is with regard to the level that you'd be operating at, who else would you be sitting around a table with? Are you at the senior level? What are some of those compensations? If it's a public company or a company that in some way reports, not-for-profits often report salaries of people, how can we figure that out in terms of what you'd feel good about? And I think I shared this a little bit earlier. The range that you're thinking about based on what you understand of the job to this point is from here to here. And you'd feel much more comfortable, again, narrowing that range when we have a little bit more nailed down in terms of what's expected and what the value is that you're truly bringing to the organization, the scope and span of control, how many people you're managing, et cetera. So when you can nail down a couple of those other things, that's going to possibly be more be helpful to you there. And again, these are all situationally dependent. So if you want to have a conversation or practice any of these with me or with other people, super helpful to do that so that you're not doing it for the very first time in that conversation. I see that we're coming up on 1 o'clock. I'm going to see if I can get through these quickly. How does your negotiation position change when you're switching careers or entering a new domain? How do you mitigate the risk? Again, situationally dependent. This goes back to, and I'd suggest you go back and have a peek at the webinar I did last year around unpacking job descriptions, where we really take some time. I've shared over and over the last past year that many job descriptions are poorly written and they don't really get into what the job is all about. So if you can unpack it and help the employer understand that you actually have a greater understanding of what this job is than they've articulated on the paper, that's going to help them to see that you actually aren't a risk. You're actually somebody who's, a clear thinker, powerful communicator, and you have the vision and then the skills and the experience to bring forward to get things done. So those are going to be things that you're going to share in your storytelling in the interviewing process, and then you'd be reiterating in the negotiation process. So hopefully those are a couple of things that help you to think about an effective pivot. And at what point, last question that I see here in the Q&A, at what point do you start to get an understanding of the salary band? I would want to be looking at this before you actually even apply. Like, is this something in a level, you might put your application materials together and submit something online, though I've shared in other webinars that most people I've found that have been really successful in opportunities have found their jobs through referrals as opposed to through online postings. They might ultimately post to something online, but the opportunity came to them from another place. If it's coming to you through referral, you're going to have some potentially insider information in terms of what the salary band is. So, I would certainly be careful not to waste time with jobs that are significantly below what you'd be comfortable with, because that's just not a good use of your time or anyone else's. Last question I saw that just popped up is, where are all of these webinars? Again, if you go to the alumni portal, the SOM portal, and then click on careers, you can find links to those career resources and webinars through there. And again, the webinars are also posted on the SOM YouTube channel under videos. So, Kayla, do you see anything else that I've not addressed?
No, I think we're good to go. Thank you.
All right, that was a lot. I'm looking forward to not talking now, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you and learning more about what your needs are through coaching conversations. And as I said before, please do take a couple of moments to, if you're reaching out, connect with me, Cindy Cornell, on LinkedIn before a coaching conversation. And also, I'd love to hear what's worked for you in this webinar and what could I have done better. So when you get the survey form after the session, please do take a couple moments to fill it out so that we can do more of this type of work in the future that helps you. Again, thank you, Kayla, for making all this happen. Thanks everybody for being with me today, and good luck. Have fun in your negotiations.